Hello and welcome to another episode of the CG Garage. This is episode number 346, featuring Jack Evans, lighting lead at Image Engine Design. Actually, a good friend of mine, and I work with him a lot at Digital Domain. He and I worked on Tron very closely together, and we do a lot of reminiscing. But he actually has a really cool and interesting past and talks about lighting and about how he got into all the different things he does. What do you think about this podcast, Kristen?
It was awesome. I called him like a firecracker. He talks almost like how his career has been. He's done it all. He's like adaptable to each job. That was fun to listen to. And just, he's taken every opportunity like he's ever been given and done it to its fullest. And he also has like a huge passion for learning. And he's also worked on just like every movie from Tron to Thor, X-Men, which he said was his favorite, and to Wreck-It Ralph. So
X-Men
it's like,
Days of Future Past, more specifically.
That's right. That's right. Sorry, there's so many.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's great. I loved it.
Yeah, he's a really cool guy, and I really like talking to him and just honestly catching up with him and seeing all the things he's done. Like I said, he and I work very closely on Tron together, and that's where I sort of really got to know Jack. And he's a very adaptable person, like you said. He really he adapts to the situation, finds a way, and just embraces it to the fullest. So it's really, really cool to do that. All right, we have a couple of announcements. What's going on right now?
All right, so we do have an online event coming up, and you can find this out at chaos.com/events. It's going to be on October 26th, and it's the Power of V-Ray 5 for Rhino, and it'll be by Chaos and 3DWS, and you can sign up online there.
Okay, and that's October 26th, right?
26th.
That's okay. So just go to chaos.com/events for all your event needs. We do have some big news, which you probably would have heard if you listened to last week's podcast with Craig Weiss. But we have won an engineering Emmy. Yay! So we're going to be going to the Emmys, which is very exciting. Vlado's going to be flying into LA so he can go to and accept the Emmys on behalf of Chaos, which is very exciting. And and you can find out if you want to know more about that. Just go to last week's episode 345 with Craig Weiss, and find out exactly how that goes and what that's all about. So it's really exciting, and you guys should totally check that out. But if people want to know more about the podcast in general, Kristen, where can they go?
You can go to facebook.com/CG Garage Podcast or chaos.com/CG Garage. And if you'd like to watch us, go to youtube.com/Chaos Group TV.
Perfect. And if you guys have ideas of other things you'd like to hear on the podcast, or different people, or you have questions or any kind of comments whatsoever, just go to labs@chaosgroup.com. That's the best place to reach us. And we'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. But for now, please enjoy episode number 346 with Jack Evans, lighting lead at Image Engine Design.
Welcome to another CG Garage, where the Chaos Group talks. You'll know it's over when the last bucket drops. We're gonna fire off rays in high dynamic range. We know that ambient occlusion is passé. Global illumination won't lead you astray. And while image-based lighting is really swell, you need to make sure everything has Fresnel.
I think the first time you and I got together was on Tron, right?
Yes, it was. That's when you... Yeah, that's where I first was introduced. We were struggling to try to figure out how to use this new renderer that seemed very much like Mental Ray, but was very much not like Mental Ray at all. And
that's right. So that was an interesting journey you and I took together, and we can talk about that when the time comes. But I think that gives people a little preview of what we're going to get to at some point. But what is your origin story? So how did you start getting into CG and doing all the kind of stuff that you did? So what was the journey that got you to sitting next to me on Tron and trying to figure out how the hell to get this renderer to work?
Yeah, it is a weird and convoluted story that would take way too damn long.
I got time.
Yeah. But honestly, my first introduction to CG of any kind was way back in college. Even though my official degree was sculpture, and I was focusing primarily on bronze and aluminum casting kind of sculpture.
Wow.
They had a they had a computer graphics department. I guess it was primarily, I think it was just like a graphics program that was like, like print and just advertising kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So they had some like Photoshop classes, but they had for a while there, they had a chair of their computer graphics department that was trying to push things towards gaming, and features wasn't really a thing.
And when was this? Around what time was this?
Yet. And this is like 94.
Okay, yeah.
This is Jurassic era. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so literally my first day of my first and probably my only Photoshop class ever, what the teacher was super excited because they had just come out with Photoshop 3.0, which had just introduced layers.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, cool, layers. What does that mean? I don't really know. Anyway, and then actually I took one 3D class. They were like trying to build a 3D program, and they kind of did, but by the time I left. But initially, like it was like they taught Caligari's True Space. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. Kind of
Mac,
like
right?
yeah. No, these were on PCs. I'm pretty sure these were on PCs. But it was I think it stayed on PC because I think it got bought by Microsoft eventually. Right. And I was curious and I looked it up, and that thing existed until 2010.
Right.
It's like, whoa. But yeah, it was like mainly a consumer level thing. I mean, the claim to fame that I think it had is it was one of the first actual ray tracers available on the consumer market.
Right.
And so, but yeah, not much use. I actually did one freelance project with that where they needed some like weird ray tracing stuff and old like standard like. You got this checkerboard floor and they wanted a chrome sphere to reflect in it and stuff. Uh-huh. But yeah, and then they also had like the very beginnings. My first introduction to 3D Studio was with R4 in DOS, where you had to boot into DOS and then you had to get to that. And what was fascinating is when they switched over to Windows NT for Macs, they lost a bunch of stuff. There was like really cool things that got lost in the transition, and then it eventually came back. But I remember like in particular,
it was like the Lofter. Remember the Lofter was really good in 3D Studio.
And then they had this the thing that I loved was like because the very first freelance project I got to do was like this like. If you remember this game Myst, way back in the day, it was kind of a Myst ripoff somebody had done, and they needed to do this like intro, and so I did this little dumb intro for it, and like had this camera moving around this room, and I could animate the camera, like I could see the Bezier of it in 3D, and I remember it took years for that to come back to Macs once they moved that, and so yeah, but the one thing that when I was thinking back on this that like. The problems we had back in the day, you couldn't do a full 360-degree rotation with one keyframe. You had to do it in chunks because it didn't have, I guess, what is it? I don't know what kind of, where it goes around the sphere instead of through it.
Oh, a constraint thing, the system. Right, okay.
Or where it's calculating the rotations differently. Right. Like you had to do like 4 90-degree keyframes to get it to, because if you went over 90 degrees, it would go the opposite direction. Yeah. And if you did 180, it was like, well, you don't know which direction it's going to go. It's just going to pick a random one. And then if you did 360, it would just do nothing. And those were the struggles we had back in the day. But so basically I took that 3D class. It was taught by the teaching assistant, which most of these classes often are, and that was Jonathan Vaught. I don't know if you know him.
Where was
He's out of Austin now. This is all in Denton, Texas, University of North Texas, back in the 90s. I remember pontificating about the, what this new internet thing was going to be and how it was going to change the world, and oh my, yes it did, and not in any of the ways that I thought.
Nope. I remember being really upset when something called .com came around. I was like, what are you talking about? You can't commercialize the internet? That's so wrong.
Right? Oh my god, yeah. But yeah, and I had a lot of friends that were just like, dude, shut up. I would just go on. It's like, this is going to change everything. It's like, well, yeah, it did. Just nothing in any of the ways that we thought, Yeah. So, through Jonathan Vaught, like, actually, he knows David Levy, actually. They're friends. And yeah, so I wasn't sure if he knew you as well. Because it's like, it blows my mind when I find people that I knew back in the day, and I'm like, oh my god, you know this guy that I met in LA? How the hell? What? How do you do? That's crazy. So it's a tiny tiny little industry. But yeah, so he introduced me to the chair of the department, and that's how I got those freelance gigs. That was Russ Pencil, this crazy dude that like he would basically, he would find promising talent in his classes, and he would like then hire them for his. It was mostly like corporate, like presentation stuff, like keynote addresses and things, and that led to my first long-term job as a graphics artist at this Primedia Workplace Learning, which was like kind of like a TV studio, but for private. It was all private subscription stuff, and it was all satellite based. And so, like, actually, there's like a picture of the facility. They're not. They're no longer in business, but like. It kind of looks like NASA out front, because you walk up, there's the parking lot, and then you walk in, and there's just this array of these enormous, like 50-foot
TVs and stuff.
Satellite dishes.
Oh, the satellite dishes.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, that's just outside. Yeah, and then you walk inside, and there was this huge, like 3-story tall TV screen array, which was like pretty, pretty impressive for this young kid, and so the kind of work, it was like, law enforcement training, fire and emergency training, and then they had some corporate stuff. And then later on, they moved into more commercial stuff where they, like, there was a short period of time where there was like Gravity Games. I don't think they still do that anymore. Okay. It was kind of like Olympics for the cool kids. So it had like motocross, it had skateboarding, and, just all that kind of stuff. And, they were doing kind of some stuff like that. But yeah, that job like introduced me to like an array of crazy stuff. Like when we first started, I was using Electric Image on Macs.
Nice.
And that was a pretty cool program, honestly, except it didn't have a modeler, and so we had to have, I can't remember what it was, but we had like a subscription to a modeling service, and you would just go through these CDs and this catalog and pick out, I need a car, and you just grab it, and then you had to like.
What was the one out of Utah that everyone used? Was it Vision? No. Something, but it was really expensive, and then it was very expensive to get those models, right?
Yeah, and well, we had like a subscription, and so we had like a book like this thick that you would go through, and then there was another book equally thick, almost equally thick, of CDs or DVDs. I think it started with CDs, then it moved to DVDs,
right? Then
they moved to online. But by that point, we had moved on to Lightwave, which had its own modeler built in, and that was a complete game changer.
Right.
Yeah, like we were, me and a friend of mine who got our start at the school and knew 3D Studio Max personally, because that was like, you could get free versions of that from the very beginning. Liberated, yeah. There, so much so that the theory was that, people on the inside were like, yeah, we're going to release this because we know this is how you get a wide user base. You get a wide user base, you're going to have, and, it kind of, I don't know if that was it, but Max kind of ruled the roost for quite some time, and it still is pretty huge.
Right.
But, so we were pushing for Max, but they went with Lightwave because it was a better deal, and honestly, I think that was a good call for them. I loved it. I had a friend who despised it from the beginning, but I recognized the value of it, and just what you could do with it. It's kind of a weird program. It was split into two. You had the modeler and then the layout section, and you had to do stuff like it. Looking back on it, it's actually a really cool idea. It's like you relegate your modeling into this world that is unrelated to world space or anything. It's all unique to that individual model,
right? And
you save those out, and it's like, well, that's kind of what we do now in Maya, and in most pipelines. So they were kind of ahead of the game on that, Yep. So we used that for a while, and then they had a Softimage suite, which then they moved to XSI, but it was so expensive we never got to use it because none of the producers had the kind of budget they needed. And it's like, well, okay, we can book the XSI suite for like a day for the price of 2 weeks on Lightwave. So we didn't really get much XSI, although we did go to Seattle. They sent us to, it wasn't Nomon, there was this other one, Mesmer.
Oh, right.
Mesmer Animation Labs, yeah. That was fun. We got like a crash course in how to use XSI, and I remember, they had Maya classes at the time, and I was like, can we just go over there and learn Maya? Because I have a feeling that's where we're going. Honestly, the thing that was the real catalyst, okay, so it was cool work, but it was a lot of not cool work. It was a lot of TV graphics, a lot of like not really fun stuff.
So was it just sort of flying logos, that kind of thing? Or
Yeah, we would do flying logos, a lot of graphics packages for like what you see on the news would be a lot of the kind of stuff.
Okay.
There'd be these like lower thirds down in the corner, and it would be like, somebody's name or some bit of information. We would create those, and then those boxes over the corner, over the shoulder boxes that you see on the news and on the nightly shows and stuff. So we would do that kind of stuff. It was all broadcast. They had an array of different programs for that. There was like Art Deco was our primary one, but there was Chiron, which a lot of people are familiar with for the live stuff. They even had a little news program for some of those networks.
Nice.
A little 5-minute news thing that I did that shift for a little while.
Oh, that's cool.
And so yeah, it was kind of neat. It was it sucked. I mean, it was midnight to 8 a.m., but yeah. I was a very miserable person to be around during those months. It was awful. My roommates, I'm surprised they're still friends with me, but I was not a good person to be around back then. But so there was a wide range of stuff. But then when we started going into the commercial stuff, we started getting some more interesting work, and that was just enough for me to be like, okay, this is cool, but opportunity comes from either you build your own opportunity and you create something awesome, or you get good projects that allow you to grow and expand. And I felt like okay, well, I can reach the top of this job, but I'm never gonna. There's going to be a limit to what I'm going to be able to do from this place. So I was starting to look out there, and we got this one project where we couldn't do the blue screen keying right because the way they captured the footage, they screwed up the fields, interlacing.
Oh, right.
They completely screwed up. So we couldn't find the drop frame, and After Effects with the tools that it had at its disposal couldn't do it. And so we needed to find something. We were looking at like either a plugin. But then, because we had Lightwave, Fusion had this deal at the time. They had the modular system, which they still have. Yep. That's what's in DaVinci. They had a DFX Plus package, and you could get this like mini package that included all the keying stuff that we needed for less than, I think it was Keylight or one of those guys, or Primat or somebody. So it was like less than a plugin. We could get an entire compositor, and it was just kind of like, okay, that's a no-brainer. So we get my introduction to a node-based compositor.
Wow.
And yeah, and then that just introduced me to I had no idea. It was really tough to figure. I mean, you're in After Effects; it's a linear, timeline.
Yeah, I remember when
thing.
I first, because I guess my first very introduction to compositing was basically After Effects, which is really just Photoshop with moving images in a lot of ways, right? Because it's layers just the same way. And then suddenly I was introduced to Nuke. My first version of Nuke was before it was even a product for to be sold. And its interface was just a gray slate with nothing on it, and you just started making something. Like you just make a node, make a read node, and then here's a view node, and then everything is just spidered out. It's like, well, where's the timeline? It's like, timeline? Just
it's not a thing. and it's because like for motion graphics, something like After Effects is perfect because it is very timeline oriented. Right. It's a lot like an editor. It's like Photoshop and an editor. And it was a real difficult transition when you're so used to 8 years of that, and then I'm like trying to learn a nonlinear thing in a motion graphics environment, which was really tricky. Yep. But so I went on their forums and stuff, or whatever it was they had at the time, and I remember thinking back to this era when we were starting out with V-Ray on Tron. The developers of Fusion were on that forum, and I remember sending files to them because I couldn't figure something out. So I was like, I don't understand what's not working here. And one of the developers would send back a fix for me, and I'm like, this is crazy. This guy wrote this program, and he is helping me. Right. And then I remember with your tight connection with Vlado and how how kind of secretive that we were using V-Ray at the time. But and I remember feeling the same kind of thing, that like we had this really tight relationship because they were a smaller company, it was a small industry, and we were like, we were doing something that they were really interested in. And I was just blown away though that some nobody out in Dallas, Texas doing some dumb healthcare education video is getting direct help from the guy who made the program I'm trying to use. And I was just like blown away by that. But like,
it is kind of a power move too when you do that, though. You know what I mean? Like, my first day at Sway, we moved into a temporary building, and somehow the IT guy messed up to transfer the licenses over from the old building to the new building, so we couldn't work for the day for V-Ray. And so I said, how many licenses do we need? And so I just emailed Vlado, and he came back with all the licenses we needed in like 5 minutes. And he's like, how the hell did you do that? It's like, just...
Yeah, I got my ways.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah. I didn't have that kind of a connection, but yeah, it was still, I was super impressed. Like, this nobody out in the middle of nowhere, and I think they might have been based out of Australia at the time.
Fusion?
Or something.
I don't know where they were based out of.
I know when you would open up the program, it used to show like, for the longest time, it would just show quokka. And I'm like, what the fuck is quokka? And I finally looked it up, and that's like, it's a bird, I think.
Oh.
I think the quokka's it's like a native bird to like New Zealand or Australia or something like that. And then they would then I started noticing redback and this and that, and I was like, oh, so it was this little thing at the bottom line when of the program while it's loading, it would just like
kind of like weta, randomly, right? Like a weta is that bird, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and it would just randomly pick some southern animal that only exists in Australia or New Zealand,
yep.
and so I was all like, well, maybe they're from there. I don't know. I'm not sure where they were, but either way,
they're still around. I guess we could find out, right?
Yeah, well, actually, it was interesting. Is I was shocked to find out recently that Fusion's no longer free. The full package, you have to pay for it again. Because, well, why not? It's a pretty amazing thing, honestly.
Right.
It's, Nuke took over and kind of conquered the world once it was released, but it's still, there's a huge value to it, and having it inside DaVinci, I've used it in there, and it has reminded me, like, all right, this is, this origins of this came from DFX Plus, which is when they modularized it specifically for motion graphic studios.
Right.
But yeah, that whole thing, that program introduced me to the whole world of like, of like VFX basically.
Got it.
I started getting into touch with people in this industry, and I was already kind of wanting to get into animation or something vaguely. I want to go to movies. I want to do something. So then I looked into like, okay, well, I can, truck out to LA, live on freaking, ramen for 3-5 years and struggle my way up to the top, or I can go to school. And I kind of knew as soon as I, going over this, like, that was going to be my way to go, because I just, some people, there are a lot of people out there saying school's worthless. It's like, well, maybe for you it is, but for some people it's super valuable. And I'm one of those people that just, I thrive in that kind of environment.
If you can take advantage of it. Some people just don't know how to take advantage of school. Yeah.
Exactly. And so, I narrowed it down to like Academy of Art in San Francisco and Savannah College of Art and Design. Mm-hmm. And when I went and checked out both of them, I mean, Savannah just like, hands down, was just by far the most advanced program you could get. And added bonus, they had a Master of Fine Arts that they were offering in visual effects. And I was like, okay, well, if all this falls apart, at least I've got a terminal degree and I can at least teach.
Yes,
so,
SCAD's a great school. Great school.
Yeah, it is. It's absurdly expensive, but it is, I don't even know what it is now. It was absurdly expensive at the time. But, some cool things when you're a grad student, their system, you go in and you apply, like for the undergrads, to get scholarships, you have to give them a portfolio and all that kind of stuff. Just to get into the grad school, you have to do the same thing. So you're automatically entered into all the scholarships you're eligible for. Mm-hmm. And so I got like a small, like $1,000 scholarship, which, was like not a lot for, it was less than a class. Mm-hmm. But I'm like, I'll take your money. I'm happy to do it. And then, eventually my wife ended up getting a job at SCAD, so I got a free class as well.
Oh, nice.
So, they had... they have a lot of little incentives. Like, by the way, if I had kids and they decided to go there, I would move there and become a professor, because they would get a free ride. Because unless they've changed that, because they'll, your children, your dependents can get a free ride. I don't know if I would recommend somebody take the full undergrad there. I don't think you should be taking like algebra from SCAD at $2,500, $3,500 a pop. Like, get those out of the way. But their program, their art program, is definitely very it's super good, and like they have industry people working there. The biggest thing, and this is always the case in our industry, it was connections, man. Mm-hmm. Every week, Sony, Disney, DreamWorks, then Digital Domain, coming out for job fairs. And then I had a professor that introduced me and Kevin Sears, actually.
Oh, right.
We were both in the same class. He was in undergrad and I was in grad, but some of the classes like blended together. Yeah. And he introduced us to Karen Sickles. Oh. And from that point on, the rest was history. Like, I actually, it's funny too because I freaked the fuck out. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
That language. I know you've had Parker on here, so
I had Parker. Listen, I've had Tim Miller on, and that's impossible to censor.
Yeah. But yeah, I actually skipped class that day because I had to finish another project, and I just needed to like just concentrate. And then I find out, the recruiter for DD showed up to class today that you missed.
Right.
And I'm like, oh no! And it didn't matter anyway.
Yeah.
We met up later, and then that led to my internship, and Sally Slade was in my internship as well.
There you go.
Yeah. So it was one of the only
I had
internship
lunch with
classes.
Sally Slade yesterday. Believe it or not.
Wow. Yeah. She's doing great.
She's doing really
Yeah.
great. She's doing great. She's doing a lot of her own
it's
little funky
awesome.
things that she's working on right now, and it's great. She's doing all this. She's doing an app to do tracking your face, and I don't know. Yeah, it's really, really cool. Okay, so you, Kevin Sears, and you and Sally, it all sort of like joined in as an intern at Digital Domain all at the same time, right?
Yeah. And then, so Kevin continued on, and he went on to Speed Racer.
Right.
I had to go back and finish, but then I got an offer to come back to work on Speed Racer, and so I was back in, like, December. And, yeah, so the rest was history from that point on.
Okay.
I mean, after Speed Racer, like, I did Mummy, and then they put me on the Honda Fit commercial series. They had this huge series of commercials.
Right.
There were like 3 of them, and one of them was enormous, another one was really small, and then they had this medium-sized one that they didn't have any team for. So they just kind of threw me at that with a couple of guys, and I ended up kind of pseudo-running it, sort of.
Okay.
And that got Eric Barba's attention.
Nice.
And I'm here. I am this idiot. Okay, I'm like finishing up this and this is the first downturn in LA, the first downturn I experienced since 2008, and jobs are kind of becoming rare. It's drying up a little bit, and I'm getting a little worried. And I'm interviewing, and I remember we had our rap party, and Eric's all like, "So, what are you doing after this?" And I'm just like an idiot at the time. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I'm trying to find something. Tron would be really cool because they had just shown us the Tron teaser in 3D in the screening room. And I was like, wow, I got goosebumps from that. And I was all like, yeah, Tron would be cool, but yeah, I know, only like, the senior guys are going to get that, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, of course, he's asking me this question because he's interested in if I am available. And then, like, a day or two later, Randy Sharp is all like, hey, I want to talk to you. And how's your modeling skills? And I'm all like, my what? Not so great. Let me tell you about how 8 years I spent not modeling anything. Right. But I did, yes. I mean, like, by the end of it, we were modeling our own stuff. But yeah, he's like, oh, you can be my technical assistant or something. And I ended up modeling a bunch of crap. I actually modeled, like, the light jets and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
I felt really guilty about it, too, because I had no modeling reel. But, like, Eric's like, I want him on my show. And I was too junior to be on the lighting department. Yeah, there was nothing to do in the lighting department. They basically had Jonathan Litt, and that was it. And so it was like there was nobody at my level that could be on that show yet. And so basically, you started right about when I switched out from the modeling team over to the lighting department. Right. Yeah, because that was like when we had first switched over. When they had decided, you know what, we're nixing Mental Ray, we're moving on to V-Ray. Yeah. But yeah, it was like terrifying at first, and I felt guilty because I got a modeling job and I got modeling friends that are out of work that are like more qualified for this job than me.
Sometimes I feel that Eric has an alternate plan for you, and you just don't even know. You're just along for the ride.
Yeah, I had several meetings because I was terrified. I was all like, I got to meet with Eric I got to meet with him right away because it's like I don't know if he knows who he's hired. Right. And I was like, dude, I'm not a modeler. He's like, I don't care. I just want you on my show because I think you're going to be valuable eventually. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. All right, we're going to do this. And but it turned out great. I mean, Randy Sharp is an amazing teacher. Oh my God, that's what Randy, he wanted to do.
I love Randy. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's what he wanted to do. Yeah. But his other family path would not have been able to afford living where they lived on a teacher's salary. And he, like, at the time, by the time I finished that, I knew more about NURBS than probably any modeler who didn't work at DreamWorks at the time. I've forgotten since almost all of it, but yeah, because we would get all of our stuff from the art department, all in NURBS, from Rhino to or or Alias and things like that.
And wasn't that
we'd
who
have
was
to
it?
then
Who was
convert
it? Who was the main art director behind? Who designed the light bike and the light jet and all that stuff?
Well, the designer was David Levy.
No, David Levy was the art director on it, but what the designer?
Well, he became the art director, but he designed. I think he designed the light. Or no. Daniel Simon.
Daniel Simon. That's who it is.
Yeah.
Who also was
he
the
designed
designer of the Bugatti.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then other stuff he couldn't tell us about because they had never released it. And I'm like, dude, what have you done?
Yeah.
But like, and literally I sat in this cubicle and Daniel Simon was right on the other side of the cubicle, and then David Levy was across from there. And so that's right, that was Daniel who did all the cars. I think most of the cars. I've got like a couple of the books back here.
Oh wow.
I got so like
we had I have a picture of me and Greg Teagarden and Daniel Simon next to like a full scale light bike, like at the premiere or something.
Man,
yeah, it was awesome.
Yeah, no, that was really it was a scary thing, and it's good to be scared a lot, honestly, because if you're not really pushing yourself. But
Right.
it was terrifying at first, but then it just became like, holy crap, I'm like here with the art department in a stage of this production that like I haven't since been a part of, except on very small shows.
Right.
But like even getting to somewhat meet Steven Lisberger, but I didn't really.
Oh, right.
I didn't want to assert myself and be a geek fanboy.
Mm-hmm.
I even got like a poster from the art department's producer that they used in the movie.
Wow.
It was the original Tron movie poster that they had retooled for the game, and it had from Enron, the makers of Space Paranoids.
Right.
And it's since been it's like kind of put away because like it got some water damage, unfortunately, and I need to figure out how to fix that. But like, yeah, he had some in the office one day, and I was like, oh my god, that is amazing. And then like the next day I come in and there's like this poster sitting on my desk, and I'm all like, what's this? He's like, nothing. There's nothing there. I don't know what you're talking about. It's just like, awesome. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So this little bit of movie memorabilia, and like I think at some point they actually had that poster up behind the Tron game when he first gets Sam or whatever the kid's name.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When he first like gets sucked into the world, I think, or something. There was like that poster was there. And so it's like, there's that poster.
Tron definitely has a
years.
lot of memorabilia. It's funny because I got sucked into a Facebook group about Tron fans for some reason, and there's so much great memorabilia out there that people get really excited about. So, in fact, the Flint's Arcade is actually a building in Culver City.
Yep, I've eaten there.
That's a good restaurant, actually. It's called Akasha. So I was like, you guys want to go to Flynn's? And we call it Flynn's for lunch. And it's like, it's not really Flynn's, but that's cool. But yeah, that was a lot of fun. So, okay, so you're doing the modeling with Randy. Randy's a great guy. I should have Randy on, actually. He would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, you should. Oh, yeah.
And then we did... but then you started doing lighting just as I came on. I remember because you were obviously a very knowledgeable lighter, but you hadn't used V-Ray before at that time. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah, just like everybody else there, basically.
Right.
We had like Speed Racer was mental ray, so we were pretty familiar with that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're trying to use mental ray techniques with V-Ray, and it just didn't. Yeah, it just didn't work, and we were struggling really hard
Right.
trying to figure it all out. And there wasn't a whole lot of documentation, especially not for what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I remember the early days with Vlado, like, just crank up the samples. It's like we can't do that because we can't have a 38-hour frame render because we have 3,000 frames to render.
Right.
So it was an education thing for all of us.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of things, and I think it was really interesting, and it was actually something that was great because I got the opportunity to sort of talk to people like you and then you teaching me how you're doing things and me going back and saying, well, this is how you would do that in V-Ray, right? Some people were, you were one of the exceptional people that would actually listen to what I was saying and say, oh, okay, that's a good way to do it, as opposed to some people's like, that's the wrong way to do it. And I was like, there was a little bit of back and forth on that. But you and I were actually doing at that time we were, just like you started off in the modeling department, and I started off, I was supposed to be an environment artist, right? Which was interesting. But then they very quickly moved me into a lighting lead, lighting supervisor role for specifically on the light bike sequence. And I was working on the light bike sequence, and you were looking on the light jet sequence, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yeah, it was me and Tim Nessa, the two of us. It was basically a two-man show for a long time,
Right?
Because everyone was worried about like the disc game, which was enormous, and then the light bike, which was equally enormous.
Right.
By comparison, the light jet was a smaller-ish sequence because it didn't have quite so much. It was mostly black.
Right.
But yeah. So it was just the two of us for a long time.
But
yeah.
it did have a very interesting challenge, which I do remember, and it was specifically about because of the speed that these light jets were traveling, there was precision problems. Do you remember that?
I remember, yeah. I knew exactly as soon as you said speed. I was like, yep. And I remember, like, we had some shot where the camera was close up, but this thing was like 30,000 units from the origin.
Right.
And we're like, why is his back sizzling?
Well,
it was just like, just geometry. Yeah.
Geometry was going all over the place, and someone specifically said, well, V-Ray is never going to be able to solve this because they have to rewrite their entire rendering engine for double precision, blah, 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 blah. And Vlad was like, well, let me see what we can do. And then, like, within, 3 days, he had rewritten V-Ray to account for that and completely solve the problem. And they were like, oh, done. Okay.
Well, but then there was a secondary part of it, though, that Maya never could get past, is you still had to offset everything, because Maya was going to then give you garbage geo, and V-Ray can't fix garbage geo that's coming in.
Right. So you had to fix it on both sides. But I remember this, it's interesting. I remember that exact same problem on Stealth, which was many, many years ago, because it's the same thing, right? You have jets traveling through the air. You just got to offset it back to the origin. Otherwise, it's going too fast.
Yeah, and I'm baffled that I still see the mistake made. It's not as often, but when I do see it, I'm like, really? I can't believe this came up. Like, somebody doesn't know you can't put your entire scene 3,000 units from origin and not have problems. So it's still a thing, I guess, because at the end of the day, we're dealing with some program there's going to be some rounding errors, and it's just a matter of, how far until those rounding errors actually make a difference.
Right.
But it's just like, that was really baffling at first, because that was the first time I'd ever seen it. And I was like, what in the world is going on here? And it took us a while to figure it out, but it was, like all those little things, and just the thing I remember most about it is we didn't use GI yet. I remember we did not use GI at all on that show, at least not on my sequence.
There probably wasn't a need for it. Because of
there wasn't
so dark.
a need for it. It was all just shiny stuff, and I remember thinking back to what we did on Speed Racer with Metal Ray, and we used Final Gather for everything, which made sense for the daytime shots, but we had a lot of nighttime scenes with cars and shiny stuff, and thinking back, like, why were we wasting all this time? Because the vast majority of the noise we got was coming from Final Gather. Right. And I just remember all the hacky, like, comp fixes we had to come up with to get around the noisy Final Gather. Right. And I think, we just chose to skip the GI, at least on ours, because it was going to give us like a 2% difference in the look. But then also, just one less thing to have to fight. Right. And, because noise was going to be a problem. Because we hadn't figured out, like, some of the details of, like, some of the counterintuitive things that you have to do to make something clean. Of course, this was like at least a decade before denoising. Mm-hmm. Like, in fact, the last time I used V-Ray, we still were not denoising yet, because it wasn't worth it. We could still get most of our stuff down to 2 hours, even if it's a huge shot. Right. So, it's like, well, I'm not going to bother with denoising because it's just going to soften stuff up. And then, then after that, like in the last 5 years, denoising has just exponentially improved. It's amazing now. Yeah, well, it's got a lot to learn from, right? It's all AI based denoising, so it basically knows every situation possible. The longer machine learning techniques are around, the better they get, right? That's the whole point. Yeah. But okay, so obviously the Tron was a big show for us, and we were working very closely on that. I remember you and I figuring out problems together, solving problems together. Mm-hmm. And the big reason we moved to V-Ray at the time, as opposed to Mental Ray, the big thing that was driving Eric Barba's decision to do that was motion blur, which is the big thing that we got much better motion blur. Oh yeah. we got motion blur.
Real motion blur, yeah.
Yeah, because on Speed Racer they still were dealing with motion vector because they could not get motion blur to complete a render, a single render with motion blur. They couldn't get it to work. Apparently, the Scanline guys figured it all out, but like
Scanline has used V-Ray forever. They've used V-Ray so forever.
Oh wait, no, it wasn't Scanline. It was who is it? The other ones that they have a bad reputation, but it's a small team of a couple of guys in Marina Del Rey. Crap, that starts with an H. Anyway, yeah, those guys apparently figured it out. I don't know. I don't want to talk crap about any studios, but apparently they came up with a mental ray solution. I don't even think they're using mental ray anymore either.
I do remember the company. I'm not going to mention it either. But anyway, so you were at DD. We worked on Tron. What other shows did you work on? Real Steel as well, or?
No, I can't remember what I worked on when you were on Real Steel. Although I do know. Yeah, because like at the end of Tron, I went up to Toronto to help out at Mr. X, and
that's right.
I actually was there was one other guy, a texture artist, who did the same trifecta as me, but I'm the one who did it while still working at DD.
Okay.
So I was still a DD employee working at Mr. X, and I was there for like 4 weeks, and then my last 2 weeks they sent me to Vancouver to finish up, and basically did like a couple of huge shots.
The recognizer stuff, and wasn't that what it was working on, or?
The end, it was, was it the Rectifier? That was the big ship that they were in.
Giant ship.
I remember there was like this
people in there and all that stuff.
Yeah, and one of the like my nemesis ray tracing type shot is down a tunnel because those are a nightmare to clean up. And I remember we were using the Vegas machines. We had rented machines out of Vegas, and Eric would always make the joke that whenever he saw that shot, because it was one of the first ones to use the Vegas machines, he's like, I just hear, like ching ching ching. I just hear the sound of those slot machines every time I watch this shot. It's like money. It's just money going out the door. It looks expensive. It is expensive. Yeah, I'm trying to think. What did I do immediately after Tron? Man, I'm drawing a blank as to
But
what
you
I did
stayed
at
up in
DD.
Vancouver after that, right?
No, I came back. So I came back to LA. I was only in Vancouver for a couple weeks, and then came back right around.
Did you work on Jack the Giant Killer? No.
They tried to get me onto that, but no. Oh, right. So I took a little time off, and then I came back. I'm trying to think if there was something in between, but I know during Real Steel I was really disappointed that I wasn't working on that because that was such a smooth running show. And I can't remember what I was doing during that period. I'll have to look up my own IMDb. Okay. Like, what did I do? But I remember like one of the next things I did, which was another weird. Like I remember getting a call from Lisa Baru out of the blue one day. During a break, and she's all like, I got a weird offer for you. Would you like to be a hair artist? And I'm like, a what? I'm like, I've never touched that. Why would you? And she's like, I don't know, Eric just thought you'd be good for this. I'm like, oh, okay, let's try it out. Okay. Yeah, and that's when I sat next to Daniel Lay, and I was doing Girl with the Dragon Tattoo.
Oh, nice. Nice.
But that's skipping some time. I'm gonna have to like look back at what I did right after Tron. Thor. That's what I ended up doing.
Right.
Thor. Yeah, that was. I wouldn't call that a fun show, but it was.
Maybe you wanted to forget about it.
Probably. No, that was a show where, I was essentially kind of by myself with Carl Denham.
Oh, right.
He was my CG suit. And yeah, I loved working with Carl. Yeah. It sucked that he had to leave the industry and go through what he's going through. But yeah, like one of my favorite supervisors ever. The dude was amazing.
He was so much fun,
he was just great to work with. But yeah, that show was like, oh yeah, we're gonna have you work in RenderMan, but we're not gonna give you any RenderMan TDs. So you're gonna have to figure this out with Michael Morehouse, who's this really smart guy, but he's a nuke TD, so have fun, guys.
Yeah.
And I remember getting in trouble because we had to bug Laura Lee a lot, and then she, I guess she would bill some of her time to our show, and then we got in trouble for that, and so she had to stop helping us. And yeah, because that was primarily run out of Vancouver, out of this one. I think it was the last vestige of any Renderman that we did, really.
Right.
And then we just had this prologue that they had cut from the show, and then they brought it back. And then we just had a small team, and it was kind of, I don't know, it was I think it was the sequence that they used to get the show back into the black. I remember they spent weeks with breath comps, and you would just see A, B, and I'm like, I can't see a difference between these two.
Yeah.
Why are we spending, and it's just because Marvel was going to pay for every single penny of it, and so they basically used that to kind of like, okay, this brought us into profitability. Yeah, exactly. This brought us into profitability. And so, like, I don't blame them for doing it. But yeah, then we did the little Ender's Game teaser with Carl as well.
Right.
Yeah, and that they sent out to Cannes, and I remember, working on a really small team. That was immensely fun. I think that was the last thing I worked on with John Nihus.
Right.
However you say his name. And yeah, that was a load of fun. I really enjoyed that. And then I think there was a break after that, and then came back for Girl with a Dragon Tattoo to do hair. That was a really cool show. I mean, that's the kind of work I love, is invisible effects.
Yeah.
The stuff that you don't even realize is enhanced, and Fincher's going to do that.
I loved
for
it
you,
when it was so, like, it was also like a small team of really talented people, right? So everyone kind of knew exactly what they were doing, or like figuring it out, and like, it was fun. And you just didn't see it. A lot of people didn't realize that whole bike scenes, many shots were 100% CG, and you can't tell.
Yeah, because like it was. I found it ludicrous too, because I watched the Swedish version of it, and in the bike chase she's wearing a helmet, but Fincher's like, no, she got to take her helmet off, but we can't have the person riding without a helmet because that's like too dangerous. So we had to chop her head off and put a CG head on top of her. Yeah, and that was the sequence that I got. Although it's like, if your first go at doing hair sims is at night in a snowstorm in a wind tunnel with a woman with black hair, you're kind of set for success there. It's like, okay, this, and they sat me next to Daniel Lay.
Did you know at the time
genius.
that Daniel Lay was VFX Soldier?
Did not. I remember when that got revealed, he was good. He was good at keeping that subtle. Although you look back and you're like, that's kind of obvious, because he was always pushing for, like, we need to unionize, and you need to get an agent and all this kind of stuff. Yeah. But then I remember I was in Vancouver when that was revealed. I had moved up here finally, and I like just texted him. I was like, dude, you're Batman. He's like, no, I'm VFX Soldier. I'm like, all right. I walked into that one. But yeah, no, I did not know. But that was at the peak of VFX Soldier. I'm sitting right next to the dude, and I'm just kind of oblivious to it. Apparently, I'm oblivious to things a lot.
Well, a lot of people used to suspect that it was someone at DD, because we'd have an all-team meeting, and then it would be on Twitter like half an hour later. It's like,
who is it?
How did that happen?
Yeah, like I think the reason that he eventually revealed himself was, I think there was a lot of just coincidental connections to some other artist, and he didn't want somebody else getting blacklisted because of what he had done, and so like it looked like somebody was going to try to out the wrong person, and it was going to be hard for that person to prove they weren't, and so he was just like,
it was specifically artists in Vancouver that were against it because of a lot of people in LA doing that. So which was really, really sad that artist turns against artists that way. So.
That was definitely the worst part of it. And when I came up here, I was trying to like gently, like, guys, you just got to recognize that this is the reality of it, and I see your side of it. I'm kind of joining you because, well, you don't
have a choice.
It's pretty much. I mean, I had a choice. I on my drive up when I was moving up here, I got messages like, hey, so there was work in LA. It was just not the work I wanted to do. Right. It was going to be like commercial work. It was going to be TV. Yep. At the time, TV wasn't as appealing. TV's a lot more appealing now. I mean, because everything's TV. It's streaming and everything.
Right.
So I was, definitely not wanting to do that kind of work as much. It was not going to be stable. This showed stability, and it proved itself because I have been without any gaps in work that I didn't want myself. So ever since I moved up here, so it's like, I expected it to be maybe 5 years and then it was going to die, but it's definitely outlasted my predictions.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah, but I'm really curious what the new work from home thing, like this whole this sea change that just hit us hard. Like, what is that going to do? Like,
well, it means if you're a
how
good
much of
artist,
the-
it doesn't matter where you live. It's what it should mean, right? And if
That's what it should mean.
And if you're a good artist and you like living in Vancouver, then great. Keep living in Vancouver and enjoying that, But
Yeah.
I just spoke to a guy who's an excellent artist I know who does a lot of mocap cleanup and different kind of animation stuff. He moved to Idaho. And he's doing everything from Idaho. He's like, it's great.
Great.
It's super cheap.
Yeah, I mean, if I could get a Vancouver salary and like live, well, I would say price-wise back in Denton, Texas, but maybe not
Right.
politically right now. But like in some cheaper place for sure. With our studio, unfortunately, we're still a little bit stuck with we have to have people in BC because we're still they're still holding to that. That's the thing.
Sure.
It's like the incentives are still there. I'm just curious if it's gonna start being harder to justify the incentive,
Right.
and it's just really kind of in a world of questionable, like where are we going?
Right.
Constantly, is this going to continue? Is this sustainable? We just got another curveball, but like the work from home thing has been great for people like me. I tend to be a bit of a of a shut-in
Right.
naturally. I like my privacy and all that, and also I have. I think I saw an interview with Seth Rogen, and he said it best is like, we're not all in the same boat. People say we're all in the same boat, but we are not. We're in the same ocean. We're in the same storm. That some of us are in better boats than others, and
Right.
I happen to be in one of those better boats. I have this beautiful view over this just really lovely Mount Pleasant area.
Right.
It's what it's called. And it's quiet. I got my dog here sleeping all day on my couch, and like it's great for me, but I know a lot of people, they live downtown. Maybe it's not so nice. You're in this like 400 square foot box, and you're just like scrunched in. When the summer comes in, no air conditioning, you're boiling all day. So some people aren't loving it as much as others. But then we have people who've moved out to Victoria, like Vancouver Island. A couple of artists who've done that couldn't do that. And we have one lighter on our team right now who is, God, somewhere somewhere way north of here, just out in the middle of nowhere, and right at the edge of our latency limit. And she's working, like 100 miles away or something like that, and just living, out in the woods. And it's like, we are very fortunate,
Right.
We are very fortunate to be in this industry. And honestly, it's like, well, we should take advantage of it. And I think so far it's been, my fear is one idiot is going to ruin it for everyone. They're going to make a mistake and something's going to leak. But so far, everyone's been super careful.
Yeah.
Because the big concern is, Disney gets spooked and then shuts it all down.
Right.
Once, but they can't yet because, we're still in wave after wave. And it's just like, well, but like, that's the concern. And like, our studio's been going through Image Engine. We've been going through like, how are we going to move back into the real world, into the regular world?
Right.
And I think they've decided, because there's overwhelming support for the work from home, that we're going to probably move into a permanent hybrid situation where it's going to be more like what is it, the WeWork thing or whatever,
Right.
where they share. Yeah, it's going to be more like that, where it's like you're going to have to like tell them you're coming in, you're going to have to book some time in an area, and maybe you have a small team there for a short period of time, or maybe we'll start doing that for training when we onboard new people.
Well, tell me a bit about your journey to Image Engine. So you moved to Vancouver. Was it for Image Engine or?
No, I moved to Vancouver for Dee Dee.
Right.
It's funny. I actually had an offer to go to Singapore.
Right.
Because I'd gone after Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. They had offered me Jack the Giant Slayer, Jack the Studio Slayer, and they offered me both a lighting position up in Vancouver, which was a pretty crappy offer, and then also I could stay in LA and do hair. And I was like, I don't really think I want to be a part of this show. Nobody's having fun. This doesn't look fun. And I kind of was like, yeah, I don't think I want to do that. And so I went, I went to Disney. I did Wreck-It Ralph. And then, and then I came back. Well, there was this one last thing, but then they sent me up here when I had to go to Eric Barba. ILM, I got an offer to work at ILM Singapore through when I worked at Pixamondo. My supervisor there, recommended me.
Okay.
So they had a pretty good offer, and I was like, well, I guess I'm going to take this because there's nothing else. Mm-hmm. And so they require, 2 recommendations, and I was like, well, I'm going to get my VFX supervisor. He's going to, or at the time, he was chief creative officer, I think, by then. Right. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to get a big name on here. This is going to get me in. Right. And I'm like, hey, can I get a recommendation? He's like, yeah, sure, but you can't go. I need you in Vancouver. I'm like, do you really? Right. And he immediately sent out an email, and next thing you know, I get back to my desk, and I'm getting an email from Karen Sickles again, and she's all like, I hear you might be available. And then I come up there for Fast 7.
Oh, nice.
Right before Scott Walker dies.
Right.
So literally, I'm here for a month, and then the star of the movie that I upended my entire life for dies, and I'm like, crap, what's going to happen here? And I lobbied to get off the show because I had no idea what was going on with it, and they ended up putting me on X-Men Days of Future Past, which was one of the coolest shows I've worked on since.
That was a great show.
It was awesome, and the thing I loved about it was our challenges were making a giant plastic robot not look like CG. And it was a cool challenge. We had technical issues, we always do, but our main issue was artistic, and it was such a rare thing in our industry that your primary issue is artistic, and how do we make this work? And of course, Tim Nassar, he's just a freaking genius, and he came up with this micro scratch thing that he would generate in Maya, and and so we did that, and then I did some other just a number of other projects, and then I was kind of getting a little burned for a little bit. I was just like, I think I might have, run my, my time here. I feel like I'm rising up to a point, I was a lead at that point and stuff, and I just kind of felt like, am I just good at DD? Is it just because I've learned this system really well? I need to test myself outside of this and also get some, get some objectivity, and get my head out of this for a bit. And so there was an opportunity to go work at ILM, work on Solo, and kind of okay, well, it's a Star Wars movie. Right. Kind of hard to say no to that. And so, did that, which was really cool, and an eye-opener. ILM was not exactly what I expected it to be.
Interesting.
You never know what, but it was just this dream that I was like, I'm never going to be able to work for ILM, of course. And then I end up working on a Star Wars movie. So I'm like, all right, well, this is kind of cool, but it's that anticlimactic thing. You're like, oh, okay, yeah, so this happened, but it's just another job, basically. It was fun. It was cool getting to work on the Millennium Falcon stuff. We had this whole 5 weeks or something where we were trying to develop this wet look as they're going through the Kessel Run sequence, and so it was very scary again. It was really scary and exciting, but then a series of other shows like Aquaman, which was kind of the opposite of exciting for me, but it was difficult, and it was huge. I mean, we had these enormous crowds and stuff like that, and but then basically they were looking at a downturn after Terminator, and I foresaw the downturn coming. And at the time, I'd always been thinking of Image Engine because they have a great reputation for being a really great employer and having a really amazing pipeline, and I'd always thought, well, one of these days I'll end up working there. And they happen to have openings for some lighting leads, and so I kind of jumped on that opportunity right before there was another kind of big purge at ILM, and for a while there was no work for ILM for a while. It's come back just like everywhere else, but yeah, so I kind of took that opportunity. I was thinking, oh, maybe in a few years, my pseudo-retirement job, but it turned into a little sooner than that. And yeah, it's kind of, I don't know, I don't regret it at all. I mean, it's a very different place for sure. They definitely have a different feel. It's more like a laboratory to me.
Okay.
You're gonna excel more if you're more technical, but they also focus very heavily on work-life balance, which is something that when you get older and you're getting towards 50, you're like kind of, I'm a little over, I could still work at DD and work 70-hour weeks and just make bank, and that's great.
Right.
But 20 years ago it was great. Maybe not so much now.
I'm too old
I
for
would
that
rather
shit.
be I would rather be a little less wealthy and a little more alive, and a little less gray hair. The gray hair has stopped growing so quickly in, and the hair back here is stopped falling out quite so fast. It's still the industry. You're going to have, a lot of hardcore hours from time to time, but it feels like there's a genuine desire to try to keep that in check.
Nice.
So
how long have you been at Image Engine?
This is going to be my third year?
Okay.
At least my second year. So yeah, I think.
What have you been working on?
2019.
Can you say anything you've worked on or working on?
Yeah, my first show was The Old Guard.
Oh, nice.
That was, with Charlize Theron. It was a lot of gore.
Yeah.
It was the easiest show I've ever done.
Okay.
I mean, we were doing just like little head wounds and stuff like that then healed because they had like Wolverine powers. They were all like these gods or something. And so it was a lot of, but then there was this one dude that had his guts blown out. And so it was really gross. Just a lot of really gross stuff, but it was really a lot of fun. Sometimes it's really fun to do that really nasty, gross stuff. And then Mandalorian season 2, we worked on a couple of those episodes. The ice tunnel, all the spiders.
Oh, nice.
That one, and then there was another one I started working on, but then I had to jump off that to get onto Fantastic Beasts, which I guess I can say that.
Right.
Pretty sure. I hope I can say that. I'm pretty sure I can. I don't think it's secret. They've already got a name.
Bleep it out if I have to.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's okay. I don't think it's, I don't have any super secret. Well, there are super secret stuff that I can't talk about for sure.
Oh, okay. Well, then we can say the name, but we won't say what you're working on.
But, well, I think Fantastic Beasts is okay though. I think that's all right. I don't think there's any secret that Image Engine is working on it. Okay. We're we've delivered an audience screening. We've already got like end dates. They've got the title for the show. Right. But I can verify for sure. I think it's okay. Right. I don't think there is. Well, there is. I mean, we have other shows in the works that we definitely can't talk about.
Just let me know because this podcast may come out actually on Monday, so it may be, we may actually need to know fairly soon. But that's all right.
Yeah, I'll double check that, but I'm pretty sure it's cool.
Yeah.
And I can obviously say that we worked on Mandalorian because the credits are out. They said so themselves. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's cool. Yeah, it's so that's the funny thing. I have a friend who left ILM. Mm-hmm. So he went to ILM. He never got to work on a Star Wars movie, and then he got hired as a lighting lead at Image Engine, and his first shot was a Mandalorian shot. So he's like, I had to leave ILM to work on Star Wars, and so that was kind of funny. But yeah, so it's like we have a pretty good relationship with Disney, Lucasfilm, whatever. They seem to be happy with the stuff we've done, and so that's been cool. It's been a nice.
Image Engine's been around for at least 25 years, and
yeah, it's one of, if not the, it is born in Vancouver.
Yep.
That was always kind of an appeal, honestly. As much as I loved DD and ILM, both of them had a lot of their senior staff in another country. My home country, but still they're in another country, and that's just kind of like.
Yeah, they're always still a satellite office, even if they're bigger than their primary office. They're still a satellite office.
Yeah, and there was always a little bit of frustration about that like there's this disconnect between most of the work's being done here, but the supervising is being done down in LA. Well, here it's all in-house.
Yeah.
We are owned by Cinesite, but Cinesite's also there's a Vancouver location, but that was a recent development, and we're kind of sister companies. Right. And so we sort of share Gaffer and stuff like that, but it's not the same. We don't have Cinesite doesn't have anything to do with our production and vice versa.
You're using Gaffer, huh? Yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you like it?
I do. It's a lot like Katana. Obviously, it's a node-based system. I'm really glad to be sticking with that because. Definitely, once I got exposure to Katana, I was just like, this is how you should be doing a lighting setup for sure. It's way better than trying to do everything through Maya or something like that. I know a lot of studios are starting to move with Houdini Solaris, and I think there's a lot of promise there, but it's going to need development. It's got a few years before it's really up to speed. But Gaffer in the right hands, like Gaffer to Image Engine is sort of like Nuke was to DD.
Right.
It wasn't built here exactly, but kind of. It was only fairly recently that their development team fully decoupled from being inside. Right. And another point of where I was using a node wrong, it was because there was a legacy element to this node. I flagged this as, hey, this doesn't seem to work right. This was like 3 or 4 weeks into me starting at Image Engine. Mm-hmm. Another week later, they realized, oh, this is a bug in the program, and they fixed it. So, like some new guy who's never touched the program can report a bug, and it's fixed within a few weeks, whereas Katana, it's like, yeah, there's this thing that doesn't work, and they're like, yeah, it's been that way for 5 years. Right. And it's the scale. It's the scale right. of the program. Things move faster when you're smaller, and you become this giant freight train, and you can't turn corners as quickly and all that. It's a weird mixed metaphor, but yeah. So
Gaffer's very interesting as a product, and I think you're right. I think just obviously right now the sense of where scene assembly is going to be very interesting, and USD is also something very interesting as well. So I'm actually curious about
I kind of want to bug them about that, because like we haven't really talked about integrating USD into Gaffer, but it's kind of like we should, right? Because it's definitely going.
Here's my advice to you: yes.
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly. I just have to voice it as a question, because I'm not going to try to be that guy that's telling the developer how to do his job.
I'm just telling you based on the hundreds of interviews I've been doing over the last year. Mm-hmm. Yes,
it is definitely the way to go.
You have no. I mean, it's where things are going to go, like it or not. So
yeah, exactly. An interesting thing is I haven't actually gotten into installing this or playing with it yet, because I've been in the middle of delivery, as you know. But there's this thing called Emulsion Beta, and it is a plugin somebody wrote for V-Ray and Gaffer. Oh. And it has to be commercialized, because I think just the nature of how V-Ray handles its licenses, they couldn't just like do they can't do open source for that. Exactly, but they can use the open source to create a closed package. So I'm hoping as things dial down a little bit with this project, I'll kind of play around with that and see.
I've heard of this thing.
I've
heard of this thing happening. I don't know how much. I don't know much about it, honestly speaking, but I know that something's happening in that area, and it is interesting to integrate, because Gaffer is open source, right? I'm correct?
Yeah, it's totally open source.
Right, so you can't really, when you make a plugin for something that's open source, it also has to be open source, which you can do, but you basically have to open source the translator and not the renderer, which is separate.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Same thing happens with V-Ray for Blender. Just put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of curious, because I have to say, I still to this day like PR Man. The latest iteration of that is pretty fantastic, but I miss a lot of things that you have in V-Ray, and the same thing with Arnold. There's some actually more annoying things from Arnold that like with the way it handles transmission and stuff, and but just the ability to go in and even though you don't necessarily have to do it that often, because V-Ray's gotten really smart with just handling stuff for you. Right. If it's not doing a good job, you can go in and you can just say, this one thing needs a lot of power put into it so it won't be noisy. But both PR Man and Arnold, they don't have that. You can do that per light, but you can't do that per surface. And that's the one thing I'm like, why can't we do this? Like, V-Ray's the only renderer I've worked with where you can go per surface and say, this thing is going to be heavy, let's throw a bunch of samples at just this guy and nobody else, and then you're hitting it where it needs to get hit. You can kind of sort of do that with some tricks.
It's gotten a lot smarter to the point where you very rarely have to, but you're right. It's nice to know that it's there if you have it.
Yeah. But and then, of course, there's a lot of other features that I doubt Gaffer would have anytime soon, like the, what was it, the thing we were using on Fast 8? That was, the adaptive lighting.
Oh, yeah.
And then the adaptive HDRIs, which I didn't even really get to play with the adaptive HDRI because that came out right about when I left.
Super fast.
Yeah. So all these little things where it's just like way smarter about cutting stuff off.
Yeah, and we can now like for example, we now have a method where you can put in 1 million light sources and it doesn't even blink. Which for most ray tracers would be like, no.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, the best we can do, I think, with Arnold is we have low light threshold, and that kind of doesn't. Actually, I'm kind of suspicious there's a bug left in there right now because it doesn't seem like it's doing what we, we'll have our low light threshold really high because we don't need all this extra stuff, and it's still like calculating 1 billion shadow rays, and we're like, why are you doing that?
Right.
So yeah, having I've missed some of these features for sure, and I've brought it up, but then at the same time, it's like in a studio like Image Engine we're not really looking at being render agnostic right now, unfortunately, and it's there's a good there's value to that as well.
Sure.
But at the same time, also like V-Ray works really great in the systems that it's designed for. You're going to miss a bunch of the great stuff when it's a plugin that's just being piped in by a third party. So I really want to see how Emulsion is doing and see what that's all about, because I do like Gaffer. But again, I like Gaffer kind of like I pushed for Katana at DD before I left, and then after I experienced it at ILM, I realized that maybe Katana wasn't the best choice for DD because just with the resources they had at their disposal to make this usable in a multi-shot pipeline and all that, you need the kind of money that ILM has.
And you need a lot
same
of
thing with
TDs
Gaffer.
to have a good Katana pipeline working. And when you do, it's great.
And that's the same thing with Gaffer is we have a for our size, we have an amazingly large TD team, and they're very dedicated and they have a really great attitude. One of the best things about them is that they assume when you make a request that you probably know what you're talking about. I don't always experience that. When there are places where you're like, hey, this is broken, they're like, it's just because you don't know what you're doing. It's like, no, I think it's broken. But I don't ever notice that sort of experience, so that's been one of the best parts of it. Nice. And also it's probably just that I'm getting older and I'm learning how to ask questions better.
Probably.
If you're this young upstart that thinks you're hot shit and you're like, this is dumb, you shouldn't be this way, of course they're not going to respond well.
Right. Of course.
But yeah.
Well, that's awesome, Jack. Well, listen, this has been we're way over time, but that's all cool.
Well, yeah, of course.
Good. But thank you so much for doing this. This has been great. I'm really glad to see. I mean, it's been great catching up with you. You and I haven't spoken in years, so it's nice to see what you're up to, and glad things are going well, and you're comfortable up in Vancouver, hanging out at home with your dog in your window.
Yeah. It's actually the coldest day we've had this year so far too, so I'm happy to be inside today.
Nice.
It's not LA. I do miss that. I miss that weather.
We have the Santa Anas now, so we get these weird winds coming through the mountains that are like, starting forest fires, which is, nice.
Not so fun. Yeah, that's the part that's been, that's heartbreaking. But it's been it's good to hear from you again. Good to see you and speak directly to you. I mean, I've watched a few of your podcasts or listened to a few of your podcasts.
Cool.
But
now you get to be on one.
There you go. Yeah.
Perfect.
Right
well,
on.
Thanks so much, Jack.
Yeah. Well, thank you.